Have you ever wondered what it feels like when the person who raised you looks you in the eye and calls you a failure in front of everyone you love? Well, I'm about to tell you exactly what happened when my father did just that at our family reunion dinner. But what he didn't know was that I had a secret that would change everything forever. If you want to hear how I got the ultimate revenge and finally found peace, make sure to like this video, drop a comment below telling me what you would have done in my situation, and subscribe to our channel for more incredible revenge stories like this one. My name is Rachel, and for 28 years, I believed David Martinez was my father. I grew up thinking I was his daughter, even though he treated me differently than my siblings. While my brother Kevin and sister Nicole got praise and support, I got criticism and cold shoulders. But I kept trying to win his love anyway. The story I'm about to tell you starts 3 months before that reunion dinner that changed my life forever. I was living in my small apartment in Brookside Manor, a quiet neighborhood where most people minded their own business. I had been working as a nurse at the local hospital for 5 years, and even though the pay wasn't amazing, I loved helping people get better. It made me feel like I was doing something important with my life. My apartment wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I had saved up for 3 years to buy the furniture, and every piece meant something to me. The blue couch came from a yard sale where an old lady told me it would bring me good luck. The wooden coffee table was something I found at a thrift store and painted myself during a weekend when I felt lonely. My bedroom had pictures of my family on the dresser, including one of me and Dad from when I was 10 years old. In that picture, he was actually smiling at me. But even though I had my own place and a job I loved, something always felt wrong. Dad never seemed proud of me, no matter what I did. When I graduated from nursing school, he came to the ceremony, but left early. When I got my first job at the hospital, he just nodded and said, "That's nice," when I told him. When Kevin got his job at the bank, Dad threw a party. When Nicole got engaged, Dad cried happy tears. But for me, there was always this wall between us that I couldn't understand. The thing that hurt the most was how he talked about me to other people. I would hear him telling his friends about Kevin's promotion or Nicole's wedding plans. But when they asked about me, he would just say Rachel's doing her thing and change the subject. It was like I didn't exist to him, or like I was some kind of disappointment he didn't want to talk about. 3 months before the reunion, I decided to do something that would hopefully make him proud of me. I had been saving money for 2 years, putting away $50 every week for my paychecks. I was planning to buy a used car for myself. But then I remembered how Dad always talked about wanting a nice car. He drove an old pickup truck that was falling apart, and he would always look at the luxury cars in the parking lot at the grocery store with this sad expression. So I made a decision that would later become the biggest mistake of my life. I took all my savings, added a small loan from the bank, and bought him a brand new silver Honda Accord. It cost me $18,000, which was more money than I had ever spent on anything in my entire life. But I thought it would finally show him how much I loved him, and maybe, just maybe, he would love me back. The day I surprised him with the car was a Saturday in March. I drove it to his house in the morning, and when he came outside to get his newspaper, I was standing there holding the keys with a big smile on my face. "Happy early birthday, Dad," I said, even though his birthday wasn't for another month. "I wanted to get you something special." He looked at the car, then at me, then back at the car. For a moment, I thought I saw something soft in his eyes, like maybe he was going to hug me or tell me he was proud of me. But then he just took the keys and said, "You didn't have to do this, Rachel." Not "thank you," or "this is amazing," or "I love you." Just, "You didn't have to do this." But he kept the car. He drove it to work every day, and I saw him washing it in his driveway on weekends. Sometimes I would drive by his house just to see my gift sitting in his driveway, and it made me feel like maybe I had finally done something right. The weeks after I gave him the car were actually some of the happiest I had felt in years. Dad seemed a little nicer to me when we talked on the phone. He even invited me to dinner one Sunday, which almost never happened. During that dinner, he mentioned that his coworkers were impressed with his new car, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I had made him proud. Kevin and Nicole both called me to say they couldn't believe I had spent so much money on a car for Dad. "You're so generous, Rachel," Nicole said. "I don't think I would have done that." Kevin was more direct. "That was a lot of money, sis. Are you sure you can afford it?" But I didn't care about the money. I was just happy that Dad seemed to like something I had done for him. During those weeks, I started planning what I would say at the family reunion dinner that was coming up in July. Every year, Dad's whole family got together at his house for a big dinner. All of his brothers and sisters would come with their kids, and it was always a loud, happy celebration. I had been going to these dinners my whole life, but I usually just sat quietly and listened to everyone else talk. This year was going to be different. This year, Dad might actually be proud of me. He might tell everyone about the car I bought him, or about how I was doing good work at the hospital. I started practicing conversations in my head, imagining him putting his arm around me and saying, "This is my daughter Rachel, and she's amazing." But while I was having these happy thoughts, something else was happening that I didn't know about. Mom had been acting strange lately. She would start to say something to me, then stop and look sad. She would hug me for a little too long when I visited, like she was trying to tell me something without words. When I asked her if everything was okay, she would just say, "I love you, sweetheart," and change the subject. I didn't understand what was wrong with her until much later. I didn't know that she had been keeping a secret for 28 years, and that secret was about to explode and change everything I thought I knew about my life. The first sign that something was really wrong came on a Tuesday in May. I was working the night shift at the hospital, and around 2 in the morning, I got a call from Kevin. "Rachel," he said, and his voice sounded weird. "Have you talked to Mom lately?" "I talked to her yesterday," I said. "Why? Is everything okay?" "She's been asking me strange questions," Kevin said. "Like questions about Dad and about when we were kids. She asked me if I remembered Dad being different with you than with me and Nicole." My heart started beating faster. "What did you tell her?" I told her the truth. That, yeah, Dad was always harder on you than on us. But Rachel, why would she be asking about that now? I didn't have an answer for him. After we hung up, I couldn't concentrate on my work. I kept thinking about Mom's strange behavior and Kevin's phone call. Something was happening, but I couldn't figure out what it was. A few days later, I went to visit Mom at her house. Dad was at work, so it was just the two of us sitting in her kitchen, drinking coffee. She looked tired, like she hadn't been sleeping well. Her hands were shaking a little bit when she picked up her coffee cup. "Mom," I said, "Kevin told me you've been asking him questions about Dad and me. Is there something you want to talk about?" She looked at me for a long time without saying anything. Then she reached across the table and took my hand. "Rachel, honey, there are things about your childhood that you don't understand. Things that I should have told you a long time ago." "What kind of things?" I asked. She squeezed my hand tighter. "Things about why your father treats you differently. Things about why you don't look like the rest of us. Things about why you're so special and different from Kevin and Nicole." I felt my stomach drop. "What are you trying to tell me, Mom?" She opened her mouth to say something, then closed it again. She looked toward the window, then back at me. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't tell you right now. But Rachel, I want you to know that no matter what happens, no matter what you find out, you are my daughter and I love you more than anything in this world." "Mom, you're scaring me," I said. "What's going on?" She stood up from the table and walked to the window. "The family reunion is coming up soon," she said without looking at me. "After that, things might be different. But I want you to remember that some secrets are kept to protect the people we love, and sometimes those secrets become too heavy to carry anymore." I left her house that day feeling confused and worried. What secrets was she talking about? Why was she acting so strange? And why did she keep saying things about me being different from Kevin and Nicole? Over the next few weeks, I started paying attention to things I had never noticed before. I looked at family photos and realized that while Kevin and Nicole both had Dad's dark hair and brown eyes, I had light brown hair and green eyes. I remembered how people sometimes said I didn't look like my siblings, but I had always thought that was just because I was the youngest. I also started remembering things from my childhood that I had forgotten, like how Dad would sometimes look at me with this expression I couldn't understand, like he was trying to solve a puzzle, or how he would get angry at me for things that Kevin and Nicole did all the time, or how he never wanted to help me with homework or come to my school plays. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that Dad had been treating me differently my whole life. It wasn't just that he was stricter with me, or that he expected more from me. It was like he didn't want me to be part of the family at all. But I pushed those thoughts away. Dad was my father, and I loved him. I had bought him a car to show him how much I cared about him. The reunion dinner was coming up, and I was determined to make it a good day for our family. I had no idea that in just a few weeks, my entire world would be turned upside down. I had no idea that the secret Mom was keeping would destroy everything I believed about my life. And I had no idea that the man I had been trying to win over for 28 years was about to humiliate me in front of our entire family in a way that would change me forever. The reunion dinner was set for the first Saturday in July. I bought a new dress for the occasion, a pretty blue one that made me feel confident and happy. I was planning to tell everyone about my job at the hospital and about how much I loved helping people. I was hoping Dad would mention the car I bought him, and that for once I would feel like I belonged in my own family. But as the day got closer, Mom got more and more anxious. She would call me and start to say something, then hang up quickly. She would show up at my apartment unexpectedly, then leave after just a few minutes. She was trying to tell me something, but she couldn't make herself say the words. 2 days before the reunion, something happened that should have warned me about what was coming. I was at the grocery store when I ran into Dad's sister, my Aunt Linda. She was always nice to me, but that day she looked at me with a sad expression and said, "Rachel, honey, I hope you know that no matter what happens, you're still part of this family." "What do you mean?" I asked her. She shook her head. "Nothing, sweetheart. Just remember that blood isn't the only thing that makes a family." I didn't understand what she meant then, but I would remember those words very clearly in just a few days. The night before the reunion, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Mom's strange behavior and Aunt Linda's comment. I had this feeling that something big was about to happen, but I didn't know what it was. I lay in bed looking at the ceiling, wondering if I should call the whole thing off and just stay home. But I didn't. I got up the next morning, put on my new blue dress, and drove to Dad's house for what I thought would be just another family dinner. I had no idea that in a few hours my father would look at me in front of everyone and call me a loser. I had no idea that I would finally learn the truth about why he had never loved me. And I had no idea that I was about to get the ultimate revenge in a way that would shock everyone, including myself. As I pulled into Dad's driveway and saw my gift car parked there, I felt a little bit of hope. Maybe today would be different. Maybe today, Dad would finally be proud of me. Maybe today I would finally feel like I belonged. But when I walked through that front door and saw the expression on Dad's face, I knew that something terrible was about to happen. And I was right. The moment I walked through Dad's front door, I could feel that something was wrong. The house was full of people. All my aunts, uncles, and cousins were there laughing and talking. But there was this weird tension in the air that I couldn't understand. Dad barely looked at me when I said hello, and Mom kept staring at me with those same sad eyes she'd had for weeks. "Rachel," my cousin Amy ran up to me with a big smile. "I love your dress. You look so pretty." Amy was Uncle Robert's daughter, and she was always sweet to me. She was one of the few people in the family who made me feel welcome. "Thanks, Amy," I said, trying to smile back. "How's college going?" "It's great. I'm studying to be a teacher, just like you're a nurse." "We're both helping people," she said excitedly. I was talking to Amy when I heard Dad's voice from across the room. He was talking to Uncle Robert and Uncle Mark, and his voice was louder than it needed to be. "You know, I'm really proud of my kids," he was saying. "Kevin's doing so well at the bank, and Nicole's wedding is going to be beautiful. They both turned out exactly like I hoped they would." I felt my stomach twist a little bit. He was talking about Kevin and Nicole, but he wasn't mentioning me. I told myself it was okay, that maybe he would talk about me later. Maybe he would tell everyone about the car I bought him, or about my job at the hospital. The first hour of the dinner went normally. Everyone was catching up and sharing stories about their lives. I talked to my cousins about their jobs and their families. Aunt Linda kept giving me these worried looks, but I tried to ignore them. Uncle Mark asked me about my work at the hospital, and I told him about how I had helped save a little boy's life the week before. He seemed impressed, and for a moment I felt good about myself. But then things started to get strange. I was in the kitchen, helping Mom set out the food when I heard Dad talking to someone in the living room. I couldn't see who it was, but I could hear his voice clearly. "Some kids just don't turn out the way you expect them to," he was saying. "You try your best, but sometimes it doesn't matter. Some people are just born to be disappointments." I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. Was he talking about me? I looked at Mom, and she was standing frozen by the stove with a serving spoon in her hand. She looked like she was going to cry. "Mom," I whispered, "is he talking about me?" She didn't answer, but the look on her face told me everything I needed to know. She put down the spoon and walked over to me. "Rachel, honey, maybe we should go outside and talk." "No," I said louder than I meant to. "I want to hear what he's saying." I walked toward the living room, and Mom followed me. Dad was standing near the fireplace with Uncle Robert and Uncle Mark, holding a beer and looking relaxed. He didn't notice me, standing in the doorway. "The thing is," Dad continued, "you can't help someone who doesn't want to be helped. Some people are just born lazy and entitled. They think the world owes them something, but they don't want to work for it." Uncle Robert looked uncomfortable. "Come on, David, that's a little harsh." "Is it?" Dad said, "I've been dealing with this for 28 years. I've tried everything, being supportive, being tough, giving second chances. Nothing works. Some people are just born to be losers." I felt my hands start to shake. He was definitely talking about me. In front of our whole family, he was calling me lazy and entitled and a loser. All those years of trying to make him proud, all those times I had worked extra shifts at the hospital to save money for his car, all those nights I had cried myself to sleep wondering why he didn't love me. And this is what he really thought of me. But I didn't say anything yet. I just stood there listening, hoping that maybe I was wrong. Maybe he was talking about someone else. Maybe he would say something nice about me in a minute. "I mean, look at Kevin and Nicole," Dad went on. "They both worked hard in school, got good jobs, made smart choices. They're both successful and happy. But Rachel..." He shook his head. "Rachel just coasts through life expecting everyone else to take care of her. She's almost 30 years old, and she's still living in that tiny apartment, working at a job that doesn't pay enough to support a family. She has no ambition, no drive, no real goals." Uncle Mark looked toward the doorway and saw me standing there. His face went pale. David," he said quietly, "maybe we should talk about something else." But Dad didn't notice. He was on a roll now, saying all the things he had probably been thinking about me for years. And then she goes and spends all her savings on a car for me. Like that's going to make up for 28 years of disappointment. Like buying me things will somehow make me forget that she's never accomplished anything real in her life. That's when I felt something break inside me. The car. My beautiful, expensive gift that I had saved for 2 years to buy. The car that I thought would finally make him proud of me. He was using it as an example of how stupid and pathetic I was. "The truth is," Dad said, taking another sip of his beer, "I'm proud of all my children, except the loser." Those words hit me like a physical blow. I felt dizzy, like the room was spinning around me. All the conversations in the house seemed to stop at once. Everyone was looking at Dad, then at me, then back at Dad. The silence was so thick I could barely breathe. I stepped into the living room, and Dad finally saw me. His face went red, but he didn't look sorry. He looked angry, like I had done something wrong by hearing him say those terrible things about me. Rachel, he said, his voice cold and hard. How long have you been standing there? Long enough, I said, and my voice was shaking so badly I could barely get the words out. Long enough to hear you call me a loser in front of everyone. Well, he said, setting down his beer bottle with a hard clink, if you don't like hearing the truth, maybe you should work on changing it. The room was completely silent now. Everyone was staring at us, waiting to see what would happen next. I could see my cousins looking shocked and uncomfortable. Aunt Linda had tears in her eyes. Mom was standing behind me, and I could hear her crying quietly. David, Uncle Robert said softly, that's your daughter you're talking about. Is it? Dad said, and there was something in his voice that made everyone freeze. Is it really? I felt like the world had just stopped spinning. What did he mean by that? Why was he looking at me like that? And why was Mom crying harder now? What are you talking about? I whispered. Dad looked at Mom, then back at me. You want to know the truth, Rachel? You want to know why I've never been proud of you? It's because you're not mine. You're not my daughter. You never were. The words hit me like a truck. I felt my knees go weak, and I had to grab onto the back of a chair to keep from falling down. What are you talking about? I said again, but my voice was so quiet I could barely hear myself. 28 years ago, your mother had an affair, Dad said, and his voice was loud and cruel. She got pregnant, and for some reason, I was stupid enough to raise the kid as my own. But you're not my blood, Rachel. You're not a Martinez. You're just some other man's mistake that I've been stuck with for almost 30 years. I looked at Mom, hoping she would tell me he was lying, hoping she would say this was all some terrible joke. But she was crying so hard she couldn't speak. She just nodded her head, confirming that everything Dad had just said was true. Mom, I said, but it came out as more of a sob than a word. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry, Rachel. I wanted to tell you, but I didn't know how. I felt like I was drowning. Everything I thought I knew about my life was a lie. Dad wasn't my father. That's why he had never loved me. Why he had always treated me differently. Why he had never been proud of anything I did. I was a constant reminder of Mom's betrayal, a living, breathing mistake that he had been forced to live with. Who is he? I asked, my voice cracking. Who is my real father? Mom looked at Dad, then back at me. His name is James Wilson. He was my co-worker at the insurance company. It only happened a few times, and then he moved away. I never told him about you. So I'm nobody, I said, more to myself than to anyone else. I don't have a father at all. That's not true, Mom said, reaching for me. David raised you. He's been your father for 28 years. No, Dad said harshly. I was just the fool who paid the bills. She's not my daughter, and I'm tired of pretending she is. The room was still, completely silent. Everyone was staring at us like we were characters in a soap opera. I could see my cousins whispering to each other, and I knew that within an hour, this whole story would be spread all over town. Everyone would know that Rachel Martinez wasn't really a Martinez at all. I felt humiliated and broken and completely alone. But then, something else started to build inside me. It was anger, but it was different from any anger I had ever felt before. It was clean and clear and powerful. For the first time in my life, I could see Dad for what he really was. Not a father who was disappointed in me, but a cruel man who had spent 28 years punishing me for something that wasn't my fault. You know what? I said, and my voice was stronger now. You're right. You're absolutely right about everything. Dad looked surprised. He probably expected me to cry or beg or apologize, but I wasn't going to do any of those things. You're right that I'm not your daughter, I continued. And you know what? I'm grateful for that, because if I was really your daughter, I might have turned out to be as cruel and heartless as you are. Rachel, Mom said, please don't dash. No, Mom, I said, turning to look at her. I'm done being quiet. I'm done trying to make people love me who never will. And I'm done pretending that this man deserves my respect or my kindness. I turned back to Dad, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't scared of him. You want to know what I think? I think you're a coward. You took your anger at Mom out on an innocent child for 28 years. You made me feel like I was worthless and stupid and unwanted, when the truth is that you were just too weak to deal with your own feelings. Dad's face was getting redder. How dare you talk to me like that after everything I've done for you? Everything you've done for me? I laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. You mean like calling me a loser in front of our whole family? You mean like making me feel like a stranger in my own home for my entire life? You mean like taking the car I bought you with my savings and then using it as an example of how pathetic I am? I reached into my purse and pulled out the spare key to the Honda Accord. I had kept it because I thought maybe someday I might need to move the car for him or help him if he locked himself out. But now I was going to use it for something much more satisfying. You know what? I said, holding up the key. That car doesn't belong to you anymore. I bought it with my money, and I'm taking it back. Dad's eyes went wide. You can't do that. That's my car now. No, I said, walking toward the front door. That's a gift I gave to someone I thought was my father. But since you're not my father, and since you think I'm such a loser, you don't deserve it. I walked outside, and half the family followed me. Dad was right behind me, yelling about how I couldn't just take his car, how it was legally his now, how I was being crazy and unreasonable. But I didn't care. I got in the driver's seat of the Honda Accord and started the engine. Through the windshield, I could see Dad's face, and he looked absolutely shocked. He had probably never imagined that quiet, sad Rachel would ever fight back like this. I rolled down the window and looked at him one last time. You know what the funny thing is? I said, I spent 28 years trying to be good enough for you. I worked hard, I saved money, I bought you presents, I tried to be the daughter you wanted. But it was never going to be enough, was it? Because you were never going to let me be part of this family anyway. Rachel, please, Mom said, coming up to the car. Don't leave like this. I'm not leaving, I said. I'm finally free. I put the car in reverse and backed out of the driveway. The last thing I saw was Dad standing in his front yard, screaming at me to come back, his face twisted with rage and disbelief. But I didn't look back. As I drove away from that house, I felt something I had never felt before. I felt powerful. For the first time in my life, I had stood up for myself. I had fought back against someone who had hurt me. I had taken control of my own story. But as the adrenaline started to wear off, other feelings began to creep in. I was driving a car that I had bought with my life savings, money I had been planning to use for my own future. I had just found out that my entire life was built on a lie. I had no idea who my real father was, or if he even knew I existed, and I had just burned every bridge I had with the only family I had ever known. I pulled over at a gas station and sat in the car for a few minutes, trying to process everything that had just happened. My phone was ringing, probably Mom or Kevin or Nicole or one of my cousins, but I didn't want to talk to any of them right now. I thought about James Wilson, the man who was apparently my biological father. Mom had said he worked at an insurance company and then moved away. She had never told him about me. That meant somewhere out there, I had a father who didn't even know I existed. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this was just the beginning. I had gotten my revenge on Dad by taking back the car and standing up to him in front of everyone. But now I had to figure out what to do with the rest of my life. I had to decide if I wanted to find my real father, or if I wanted to try to repair things with Mom and my siblings, or if I wanted to just start over somewhere completely new. As I sat in that gas station parking lot, I made a decision that would change the direction of my entire life. I was going to find James Wilson. I was going to learn the truth about who I really was and where I came from. And I was going to build a new life for myself. One that didn't depend on trying to please people who would never accept me. But first, I had to go home and figure out how to untangle myself from the Martinez family once and for all. I had to decide what to do about my relationship with Mom, who had lied to me for 28 years, but who also seemed to genuinely love me. I had to figure out how to handle Kevin and Nicole, who were probably just as shocked as I was by everything that had happened. As I drove back to my apartment in Brookside Manor, I realized that my life was about to become completely different. I was no longer Rachel Martinez, the disappointment daughter who could never make her father proud. I was Rachel Wilson, maybe a Rachel something else entirely. I was a person with a whole new story to discover. But just as I was starting to feel hopeful about my future, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something told me I should answer it. "Hello," I said. "Is this Rachel Martinez?" a man's voice asked. "Who is this?" "My name is Detective Johnson with the Brookside Police Department. I'm calling because your father, David Martinez, has filed a report claiming that you stole his vehicle." My hand started shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. "What did you just say?" "Ma'am, I need you to stay calm," Detective Johnson said in a professional voice. "Mr. Martinez has reported that you took his 2023 Honda Accord without permission. He's asking us to file charges for grand theft auto. Can you tell me your side of the story?" I pulled into the parking lot of a fast food restaurant because I was shaking too much to drive safely. "Officer, that car isn't stolen. I bought it with my own money 3 months ago. I have all the paperwork to prove it." "Ma'am, the vehicle is registered in David Martinez's name. Do you have documentation showing that you purchased the vehicle?" My heart sank. When I bought the car, I had put it directly in Dad's name because I wanted it to be a complete surprise. I had the receipt from the dealership and my bank records showing the payment, but legally, the car belonged to him. I have the receipt and my bank records," I said, "but I put the car in his name because it was supposed to be a gift." There was silence on the other end of the phone. Then Detective Johnson said, "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to return the vehicle to Mr. Martinez immediately. If you don't, he can press charges against you." "But I paid for it," I said, my voice getting louder. "I spent $18,000 of my own money on that car." "I understand this is a difficult situation," the detective said, "but according to the law, the car belongs to whoever's name is on the title. You'll need to work this out in civil court if you want to recover your money." I felt like I was drowning all over again. Not only had I just discovered that my entire life was a lie, but now the man who had raised me was trying to have me arrested for taking back something I had bought with my own money. "How long do I have?" I asked. "I need you to return the vehicle within the next 2 hours, or Mr. Martinez says he'll press charges." After I hung up, I sat in that parking lot and cried harder than I had ever cried in my life. Everything was falling apart. Dad was trying to have me arrested. I had just found out I wasn't part of the family I thought was mine. And now I was going to lose the car that represented 2 years of my hard work and sacrifice. But then I remembered something. When I bought the car, the salesman had given me a folder with all the paperwork. I had kept it in my apartment, thinking I might need it for insurance purposes. Maybe there was something in there that could help me. I drove home as fast as I could without breaking the speed limit. My apartment felt different now, like it belonged to someone else. Everything looked the same, but I felt like a completely different person than the one who had left that morning. I found the folder in my bedroom dresser and spread all the papers out on my kitchen table. There was the purchase agreement, the financing documents, my bank records, and the receipt. But there was also something else I had forgotten about, a document from the dealership that showed the car had been bought as a gift, with my name listed as the purchaser and Dad's name as the recipient. I took pictures of everything with my phone and called the police station back. When Detective Johnson answered, I explained about the gift documentation. "That's helpful," he said, "but it doesn't change the fact that the title is in his name. You're going to need to resolve this in court. For now, you still need to return the vehicle." I hung up and stared at the papers on my table. I had 2 choices. I could give the car back to Dad and let him win again, or I could fight this and risk going to jail. The old Rachel would have given up and apologized and tried to make peace. But the old Rachel had died in that living room when Dad called me a loser in front of everyone. I decided to call a lawyer. I found one online who specialized in family disputes, and even though it was Saturday evening, she agreed to meet with me at her office for an emergency consultation. Attorney Patricia Mills was a woman in her 50s with gray hair and kind eyes. She listened to my whole story without interrupting, taking notes as I talked. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and shook her head. "Rachel, I have to be honest with you. This is a complicated situation. Legally, your father has the right to that car because it's in his name. But the fact that you have documentation showing you purchased it as a gift gives us some options." "What kind of options?" "We can file a civil lawsuit to recover the money you spent on the car. We can also argue that since the car was a gift, and since Mr. Martinez has now rejected you as his daughter, the conditions of the gift have been violated." "How long would that take?" "Several months, maybe longer. And there's no guarantee we'd win." I felt my heart sink again. "So he gets to keep the car and have me arrested?" "Not necessarily," Attorney Mills said. "There's another option, but it's risky. We could argue that you had implied permission to use the vehicle since you purchased it and have had access to it since the day you bought it. If we can show that you've been using the car regularly with his knowledge and consent, we might be able to get the theft charges dropped. But I haven't been using it regularly. I gave it to him and he's been the one driving it." "That's a problem," she admitted. "But Rachel, I have to ask you something. Are you sure you want to fight this? This is going to get messy, and it's going to cost you money you probably don't have. Sometimes it's better to walk away from a toxic situation and start fresh." I thought about her question for a long time. Was it worth it to fight for a car that represented so much pain and disappointment? Or should I just give it back and move on with my life? "I don't care about the car," I finally said. "I care about the principle. He spent 28 years making me feel like garbage, and now he wants to have me arrested for taking back something I bought with my own money. I'm not going to let him win again." Attorney Mills nodded. "Okay, then here's what we're going to do. I'm going to call Detective Johnson and explain the situation. I'm going to argue that you had implied permission to use the vehicle, and that this is a civil matter, not a criminal one. It might not work, but it's worth a try." She called the detective while I sat there feeling anxious and scared. I could only hear her side of the conversation, but it sounded like she was making a good argument. She talked about the purchase documents, the gift paperwork, and the fact that I had maintained the spare key with Dad's knowledge for 3 months. When she hung up, she had good news. Detective Johnson is going to talk to the prosecutor. He said that given the circumstances, they might be willing to treat this as a civil matter instead of a criminal one. But you still need to return the car tonight. What's the point of fighting if I have to give it back anyway? Because once we file the civil lawsuit, we can ask the court to order that the car be held in escrow until the case is resolved. That way, neither of you can use it while we're fighting over it. It wasn't the victory I had hoped for, but it was something. At least Dad wouldn't get to drive around in my car while he was trying to destroy my life. I drove the Honda Accord back to Dad's house around 9 o'clock that night. I was hoping to just leave it in the driveway and walk away, but Dad was waiting for me on the front porch. He looked angry and satisfied at the same time, like he had won some kind of contest. "I thought you might try to keep it," he said as I got out of the car. "I'm glad you came to your senses." "I'm not giving this to you," I said, putting the keys on the hood of the car. "I'm returning it because I don't want to go to jail. But my lawyer is going to file a lawsuit on Monday, and we're going to fight for every penny I spent on this car." Dad laughed. "Your lawyer? Rachel, you can't afford a lawyer. You spent all your money on this car, remember?" "I'll figure it out," I said. "I'd rather be broke than let you steal from me." "I'm not stealing anything. This is my car. You gave it to me. I gave it to someone I thought was my father. But since you're not my father, and since you've made it clear that you hate me, the gift is revoked." Dad's face got red again. That's not how gifts work, Rachel. You can't just take back something because your feelings got hurt. Watch me, I said. I started walking toward the street where I had asked my coworker Jenny to pick me up. But Dad followed me. You know what your problem is, he called after me. You're just like your mother. You think you can do whatever you want and then play the victim when there are consequences. I stopped walking and turned around. What did you just say? You heard me. Your mother was a cheater and a liar, and you're just like her. You're selfish and entitled, and you think the world revolves around you. My mother made a mistake 28 years ago, I said. But you know what? At least she's capable of love. At least she tried to protect me from finding out what kind of man you really are. Protect you? Dad laughed again. She was protecting herself. She knew that if you found out the truth, you'd see her for what she really is. And what's that? A woman who destroyed her family because she couldn't keep her legs closed. I felt that clean, clear anger rising up in me again. You know what I think? I think you're glad Mom had an affair. I think you're glad you have an excuse to be cruel to me. Because if I was really your daughter, people would expect you to love me. But this way, you get to be the victim. You get to blame all your problems on Mom's mistake from almost 30 years ago. Dad stepped closer to me, and for a moment I thought he might try to hit me. But then I heard a car door slam, and Jenny was walking toward us. Rachel, is everything okay? She asked. Everything's fine, I said, not taking my eyes off Dad. I was just leaving. As Jenny and I got in her car, Dad yelled after us, Don't think this is over, Rachel. I'm not going to let you ruin my life because you can't handle the truth. But I didn't answer him. I was done talking to David Martinez. From now on, he could communicate with me through my lawyer. On the ride back to my apartment, Jenny asked me what had happened. I told her the whole story, from the family dinner to the paternity revelation to the car situation. She listened without judgment, which was exactly what I needed. So what are you going to do now? She asked. I'm going to find my real father, I said. I'm going to learn the truth about who I am and where I come from. And I'm going to build a life that doesn't depend on trying to please people who will never accept me. That sounds like a good plan, Jenny said. But Rachel, are you sure you're ready for what you might find? What if your biological father doesn't want to meet you? What if he's not a good person? I had been thinking about the same questions. I don't know, I admitted, but I have to try. I've spent my whole life feeling like I don't belong anywhere. Maybe if I find out where I really came from, I'll finally understand who I'm supposed to be. When I got home that night, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and started searching for information about James Wilson. Mom had said he worked at an insurance company 28 years ago, but she hadn't told me which one. I started with the insurance companies that had been in our town back then, but there were dozens of them. I searched social media, public records, and professional directories. I found several James Wilsons who were the right age, but none of them seemed to match what Mom had told me. Some lived too far away, some had the wrong job history, and some had been married for longer than 28 years. After 3 hours of searching, I was getting frustrated and tired. But then I remembered something. When I was a kid, Mom used to get Christmas cards from some of her old coworkers. I had always assumed they were just being polite. But what if one of them was from James Wilson? I called Mom's house, even though it was almost midnight. She answered on the first ring, like she had been waiting for my call. Rachel, honey, I'm so sorry about what happened today, she said before I could even say hello. I should have told you the truth years ago. Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Okay. Do you still have any contact with James Wilson? Any Christmas cards, emails, anything? There was a long pause. Why do you want to know? Because I want to find him. I want to meet my real father. Rachel, I don't think that's a good idea. It's been 28 years. He has his own life now. He's probably married with kids. finding him could cause a lot of problems for everyone. Mom, I don't care if it causes problems. I need to know where I came from. I need to understand who I am. Another pause. I did get a Christmas card from him about 5 years ago. But Rachel, please think about this. What if he doesn't want to meet you? What if he's not the kind of person you hope he is? Then at least I'll know the truth, I said. Do you still have the card? Yes, I think so. It's in my jewelry box upstairs. Can you bring it to me tomorrow? Rachel, are you sure about this? Mom, I'm more sure about this than I've ever been about anything in my life. The next morning, Mom came to my apartment with a small white envelope. Inside was a Christmas card with a picture of a man, a woman, and 2 teenage boys. The card was signed Merry Christmas from the Wilson family, James, Susan, Michael, and David. I stared at the picture for a long time. James Wilson looked like he was in his 50s, with graying hair and kind eyes. He was standing next to a woman who was probably his wife, and they both had their arms around 2 boys who looked like they were in high school. He has a family, I said. Yes, Mom said softly. He does. I looked at the return address on the envelope. James Wilson lived in a town called Riverside, about 3 hours away from us. He had been living there for at least 5 years, maybe longer. Mom, I have to ask you something else. When you were with James, did you love him? She looked surprised by the question. What do you mean? I mean, was it just a fling, or did you have real feelings for him? She sat down on my couch and stared at her hands. I was young and confused. Your father, David, was working all the time and we were having problems. James was kind and funny, and he paid attention to me. For a few months, I thought I might leave David and be with James instead. What happened? James got a job offer in another state. He said he wanted me to come with him, but I couldn't leave David and Kevin and Nicole. And then James left, and a few weeks later I found out I was pregnant. Did you ever tell David that you might leave him? No. And when I found out about you, I decided to try to make my marriage work. I thought David would never find out, and I thought we could be happy. But he did find out. Yes, when you were about 2 years old. You got sick and had to go to the hospital, and they did some blood tests. David saw the results and figured out that you couldn't be his daughter. I felt sick to my stomach. He's known for 26 years. Yes. And he's been punishing me for it ever since. Mom started crying. I'm so sorry, Rachel. I never meant for any of this to happen. I just wanted you to have a father who loved you. I looked at the Christmas card again. James Wilson looked happy in the picture. He had his arms around his wife and sons, and they all looked like they belonged together. I wondered if there was room in that family for one more person, or if showing up in their lives would just cause the same kind of pain and chaos that had been following me around for 28 years. But I had to try. I had to at least give James Wilson the chance to know that I existed. Maybe he would reject me, just like David had. But maybe, just maybe, he would welcome me into his life. I spent the rest of that Sunday planning my trip to Riverside. I called in sick to work for Monday and Tuesday, and I booked a hotel room online. I didn't have a lot of money left after paying attorney mills, but I had enough for a short trip. On Monday morning, I got in my old car and started driving toward Riverside. I had no idea what I was going to say to James Wilson when I found him. I had no idea how he would react to discovering that he had a daughter he never knew about. But I knew I had to try. As I drove down the highway, I thought about everything that had happened in the last few days. I had lost the family I thought was mine, but maybe I was about to find the family I was meant to have. I had been humiliated and betrayed, but I had also found a strength I never knew I had. I was no longer the quiet, sad girl who tried to please everyone. I was Rachel Wilson, and I was going to find out exactly what that meant. But as I pulled into the parking lot of the hotel in Riverside, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There was a police car in the parking lot, and 2 officers were standing next to it looking at their phones. One of them looked up and saw me, and then he started walking toward my car. I realized that somehow David Martinez had found me. Even though I had returned his car, even though I had tried to handle everything legally, he was still trying to destroy my life. "Ma'am," the officer said as I rolled down my window, "are you Rachel Martinez?" "Yes," I said, my heart pounding. "I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle." My hands were shaking as I got out of my car. The police officer was young, maybe in his 20s, and he looked serious but not angry. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Williams with the Riverside Police Department. We received a call from the Brookside Police asking us to locate you." "What for?" I asked, even though I was pretty sure I already knew the answer. "There's been a development in the case involving the vehicle dispute with David Martinez. Detective Johnson needs to speak with you immediately." I felt my heart sink. "Am I under arrest?" "No, ma'am, not at this time. But I do need you to call Detective Johnson right away." Officer Williams handed me his phone, and Detective Johnson answered on the first ring. "Ms. Martinez, I'm glad we found you. Where are you right now?" "I'm in Riverside. What's going on?" "I returned the car like you told me to." "I know you did, and I appreciate that. But we have a problem. Mr. Martinez called this morning and said you threatened him yesterday evening. He's claiming that you said you were going to make him pay for what he did to you." I tried to remember exactly what I had said to Dad when I dropped off the car. I told him my lawyer was going to file a lawsuit. I never threatened him. "He also says you told him you were going to ruin his life." "That's not what I said. He said he wasn't going to let me ruin his life, and I didn't even respond to that." There was a pause. "Ms. Martinez, I believe you. But Mr. Martinez is making these claims, and he's also filed for a restraining order against you. The judge granted a temporary order this morning." I felt like the ground was falling out from under me. "A restraining order? For what?" "The order states that you cannot contact Mr. Martinez, come within 500 feet of his home or workplace, or make any threats against him or his property." "But I never threatened him." "I understand your frustration, but the restraining order is in effect regardless. You'll have a hearing in 2 weeks where you can contest it. Until then, you need to stay away from Mr. Martinez completely." After I hung up, Officer Williams looked at me with sympathy. "Are you okay, ma'am? You look like you're about to pass out." "I'm fine," I said, but I wasn't fine at all. Everything was spinning out of control. Not only had I lost my family and discovered that my entire life was built on lies, but now David Martinez was trying to make it look like I was some kind of dangerous criminal. "Can I ask what brought you to Riverside?" Officer Williams said. I thought about lying, but I was too tired and stressed to come up with a good story. "I'm looking for someone who might be my biological father." The officer's expression softened. "That's a big step. Are you sure you're in the right headspace for something like that, given everything else you're dealing with?" "Honestly, I don't know. But I've come this far and I need to see this through." Officer Williams nodded. "Well, you're not in any trouble here in Riverside. Just make sure you stay away from Brookside until you get that restraining order sorted out." After he left, I sat in my hotel room trying to figure out what to do next. I had driven 3 hours to find James Wilson, but now I was wondering if I was making a huge mistake. What if showing up in his life caused the same kind of chaos that seemed to follow me everywhere? But then I looked at the Christmas card again, and I knew I couldn't give up now. I had lost everything else, my family, my sense of identity, my savings. The only thing I had left was the hope that somewhere out there, I had a father who might actually want to know me. I used the hotel's computer to look up James Wilson's address. According to the online directory, he lived on Maple Street in a neighborhood called Cedar Hills. I drove by his house that afternoon, just to see what it looked like. It was a nice 2-story house with a big front yard and a garden full of flowers. There was a basketball hoop in the driveway and 2 cars parked in front, a blue sedan and a red pickup truck. It looked like the kind of house where a happy family would live. I parked across the street and watched the house for about an hour, trying to get up the courage to knock on the door. At around 4 o'clock, the front door opened and a teenage boy came out. He was tall and had dark hair, and he was carrying a basketball. He looked like he was about 16 or 17, which would make him one of the boys from the Christmas card picture. A few minutes later, an older man came out of the house. He was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, and he had graying hair and kind eyes. It was definitely James Wilson, my biological father. I watched him talk to the teenager for a few minutes, and then they both got in the blue sedan and drove away. I followed them at a distance, and they went to a nearby park where there were basketball courts. James sat on a bench while the boy played basketball with some other kids. This was my chance. I could walk over to James while he was sitting alone and introduce myself. But as I sat in my car watching him, I started to panic. What if he didn't believe me? What if he got angry? What if he called the police and had me arrested for stalking him? I sat there for another hour, watching James Wilson cheer for his son and talk to other parents. He looked like a normal, happy man with a normal, happy life. Did I have the right to disrupt that? But then I thought about everything that had happened to me in the last few days. I thought about David Martinez calling me a loser in front of my entire family. I thought about him trying to have me arrested and getting a restraining order against me. I thought about 28 years of feeling like I didn't belong anywhere. I got out of my car and walked toward the basketball court. James Wilson was sitting on a bench by himself, watching the game. I walked up to him slowly, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might explode. "Excuse me," I said. "Are you James Wilson?" He looked up at me with a friendly smile. "Yes, I am. Do I know you?" "No, you don't know me. But I think you might be my father." The smile disappeared from his face. He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him trying to process what I had just said. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "My name is Rachel Martinez." "Well, Rachel Wilson, I guess. My mother is Linda Martinez. 28 years ago, you worked together at an insurance company." James's face went completely white. He looked around the park like he was making sure no one else had heard what I said. "I think there's been some kind of mistake." "I don't think there has been," I said gently. "I have a Christmas card you sent my mother 5 years ago, and I just found out a few days ago that the man who raised me isn't my biological father." James stood up from the bench and started walking away from the basketball court. I followed him, keeping some distance so the other parents wouldn't overhear our conversation. "This is impossible," he said, more to himself than to me. "Linda never told me she was pregnant. She said you moved away before she found out." He stopped walking and turned to look at me. For the first time, he really studied my face. I could see him looking at my eyes, my nose, my hair, trying to see if there was any family resemblance. "You have my mother's eyes," he said quietly. "Your mother." "My mother had green eyes, just like yours. And your hair, it's the same color mine was when I was younger." We stood there looking at each other for a few more minutes. I could see that he was starting to believe me, but he also looked terrified. "Does anyone else know you're here?" he asked. "No, I didn't tell anyone I was coming." "And Linda, does she know you're looking for me?" "Yes, she gave me your address from the Christmas card." James ran his hands through his hair. "Rachel, this is a lot to process. I have a wife and 2 sons. They don't know anything about you or about what happened between me and your mother." "I'm not here to cause problems for your family," I said quickly. "I just wanted to meet you. I wanted to know where I came from." "But your showing up here is going to cause problems whether you mean to or not. How am I supposed to explain to my wife that I have a daughter I never knew about?" I felt my heart sinking. He was rejecting me, just like David Martinez had, just like I had been afraid he would. "I'm sorry," I said. "I shouldn't have come here. I'll leave you alone." I started to walk back toward my car, but James called after me. "Wait, Rachel, wait." I turned around and he was following me. I didn't say I wanted you to leave. I just said this is complicated. Everything about my life is complicated right now, I said. Finding out about you is actually the least complicated thing that's happened to me this week. James looked curious. What do you mean? So I told him. I told him about the family reunion dinner, about David Martinez calling me a loser in front of everyone, about finding out the truth about my paternity. I told him about the car and the restraining order and how I felt like my entire life had fallen apart in the space of a few days. James listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he looked sad and angry at the same time. Linda married David Martinez, he asked. Yes, right after you left town. I asked her to come with me, he said quietly. I had a job offer in California, and I wanted her to leave her husband and start a new life with me. But she said she couldn't abandon her family. She had 2 other kids, Kevin and Nicole. I know. She talked about them all the time. She felt guilty about the affair because of them. Did you love her? James was quiet for a long time. Yes, he finally said. I loved her very much. If she had come with me, I would have married her. But she didn't come. No, and I was hurt and angry. So I took the job in California and tried to forget about her. I met Susan a year later, and we got married and had Michael and David. David, my younger son. He's 16. James looked embarrassed. I named him after your stepfather, actually. Linda used to talk about her husband David, and I guess the name stuck in my head. I thought about the irony of that. James Wilson had named his son after the man who had spent 28 years making my life miserable. James, I said, I don't want to cause problems for your family, but I also don't want to walk away and never see you again. Is there some way we could get to know each other without disrupting your life? He thought about it for a long time. I don't know. I need to think about this. I need to figure out how to tell Susan and the boys. What if you don't tell them right away? What if we just meet for coffee sometimes, and you can decide later if you want them to know about me? You would be okay with that? Being a secret? I laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. I've been living as someone else's secret my whole life. At least this time it would be by choice. James pulled out his phone and looked at the time. I need to get David home for dinner. But Rachel, can I call you tomorrow? Can we talk about this more? Yes, I said, giving him my phone number. I'm staying at the hotel on Main Street for one more night. Okay, I'll call you tomorrow morning, and we'll figure out what to do next. As I walked back to my car, I felt hopeful for the first time in days. James Wilson hadn't rejected me completely. He was scared and confused, but he seemed like he might actually want to get to know me. And unlike David Martinez, he had looked at me with kindness instead of cruelty. That night, I called my friend Jenny to tell her about meeting James. He seems like a good man, I said. He's nothing like David Martinez. That's great, Rachel. But are you sure you want to start a relationship where you have to be a secret? It's not forever. He just needs time to figure out how to tell his family. And what if he decides not to tell them? What if he wants to keep you hidden forever? I hadn't thought about that possibility, and it scared me, but I pushed the fear away. I'll deal with that if it happens. Right now, I'm just happy that he didn't slam the door in my face. The next morning, James called me at 8 o'clock. Rachel, I've been up all night thinking about this. I want to get to know you, but I need to do this the right way. What do you mean? I mean, I need to tell Susan and the boys the truth. They deserve to know, and you deserve better than being kept as a secret. I felt my heart start beating faster. Are you sure? What if they don't react well? Then we'll deal with that when it happens. But Rachel, if you're my daughter, then you're part of this family. And families don't keep secrets from each other. When are you going to tell them? Tonight after dinner. And then, if you're willing, I'd like you to come over tomorrow and meet them. I felt like crying, but this time it was from happiness instead of pain. Yes, I said. I would love that. Good. But Rachel, I need you to be prepared for the possibility that this might not go smoothly. Susan is going to be shocked, and the boys might be confused or angry. Are you ready for that? I'm ready for anything, I said. I've been through the worst week of my life, and I survived it. I can handle whatever happens next. That evening, I sat in my hotel room waiting for James to call and tell me how his family had reacted to the news. I was nervous and excited and terrified all at the same time. In less than 24 hours, I might have a completely new family. Or I might be rejected all over again. At 9 o'clock, my phone rang. It was James, and he sounded tired but happy. How did it go? I asked. Better than I expected, he said. Susan was shocked, obviously, and she's hurt that I never told her about Linda. But she wants to meet you. She says any daughter of mine is welcome in this house. What about your sons? Michael is curious. He's always wanted a sister. David is a little more skeptical, but he'll come around. So I can come over tomorrow? Yes, come over around noon. We'll have lunch and get to know each other. After I hung up, I sat on my hotel bed and tried to process everything that had happened. A week ago, I was Rachel Martinez, the disappointing daughter who could never make her father proud. Now I was Rachel Wilson, about to meet a family who might actually want me. I thought about David Martinez and his restraining order and his attempts to make me look like a criminal. I thought about all the years I had wasted trying to earn his love, not knowing that it was impossible because I wasn't even his daughter. But I also thought about James Wilson and his kind eyes and his willingness to disrupt his comfortable life to make room for me. I thought about Susan Wilson, who could have been angry and jealous, but instead chose to welcome me. I thought about Michael and David Wilson, who were about to get a sister they never knew they had. For the first time in my life, I felt like I might actually belong somewhere. I felt like I might be part of a family that chose to love me instead of one that was forced to tolerate me. The next day, I drove to the house on Maple Street with a bouquet of flowers and a heart full of hope. When James opened the door, he was smiling. Behind him, I could see a woman with blonde hair and a warm smile, and 2 teenage boys who were looking at me with curiosity. Rachel, James said, welcome home. As I stepped into that house, I realized that my story wasn't ending, it was just beginning. I had lost one family, but I had found another. I had been rejected by the man who raised me, but I had been embraced by the man who created me. David Martinez could keep his car and his restraining order and his anger. I didn't need any of it anymore. I had something much more valuable than anything he could take away from me. I had a father who was proud to call me his daughter. I had a family who wanted me just as I was. And for the first time in 28 years, I had a place where I truly belonged. The revenge I had gotten on David Martinez wasn't about hurting him or taking his possessions. The real revenge was building a life so much better than anything he had ever offered me that his rejection became a gift instead of a punishment. As Susan Wilson hugged me and welcomed me into her home, I smiled and thought about how sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. David Martinez had called me a loser, but he was wrong. I wasn't a loser at all. I was a winner. I just hadn't known it yet.